I know I has been procrastinating quite a lot on saying something about this one. I wanted to start with it, I think, a week after I learned that I had already made something minimally short and minimally close to the idea itself. I didn't want to say too many things, I didn't want to sound incredibly deep, I simply wanted to begin with something, let's say, and to give a proper explanation about something that at least today, I can feel affects so many people in so many ways that it might as well get observed as a properly interesting thing. Not simply a damaging one, but rather an interesting one. Something capable of changing what you are truly. And yeah, it should be quite obvious I'm not going to go on about that much more today. It is simply about how we think about limitations and how we use our time into believing about them and letting almost them affect our realities and whatnot. I always thought that in general we are people, we are subjects who are bound by their environment to a certain degree, even limited by what could happen around us, as it is quite expected that you could not dream of something so incredibly out of your possibilities that it could represent the very change of all the structures in place that hold the very system in which you live. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we fully comprehend what it is a limitation in and of itself. Sadly, once you open yourself up to the possibility of discovery, you are given one tiny realization, and that is, sadly, in this world, in this universe, very few times you are truly conscious of what holds you back from doing the things that you want to. You are never completely aware of how much you are fully stopped by things. But this doesn't mean that you are so impeded from doing what you wish that there might as well be no opportunity for you to achieve what you dream of, let's say. It suddenly goes in the complete opposite direction. It almost is like a sad shock, suddenly. You discover with time that in this world, not so many things affect you the way in which you thought before. Not so many people are as influential in your own existence as you think. Not so many opinions will really alter the results that you get from your efforts, and even more, not so many things are against what you wish to obtain. I don't like that we lack all of that understanding. I wanted to try and talk about it properly because I feel as if there were no other way to try and explain it. You can realize it if you are on the other side of this discussion. If you have already finished this, if you are considering it for a second time, if you have already observed that to be your own reality, instead of assuming that this is only an empty promise or something of that sort, you realize we can't tell enough people how necessary it is to discard those assumptions of the world, pre assumptions, which end up limiting you so much, which become the real limits of your potential. And it sounds like a almost desperate cry, which nothing truly makes sense, but not because it isn't contained in something real, not because it can't ever be something properly useful for others. Rather, it is more along the lines of suddenly this world. At the very least today, we haven't found enough evidences about how you fully convey your ideas with the utmost precision so that others can understand what you are trying to say, what you are trying to offer. And sadly, it is yet another limiting factor. But it doesn't mean that it can't be tried. If you, I can say it like this, because I believe it, if you were to give me 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more, I can promise you that it might as well change you in some way. But not because it was never tested before, but rather due to how it also worked on me, I guess. It is the sharing what you have already learned from life, what makes it so interesting, let's say. But yeah, I think I had one kind of, while only mentioning the surrounding concepts, never even tries to get into it by itself. And it is only out of respect because you realize subtly we are not really that attuned towards the comprehension of something so direct, and that has to deal mostly with the nature of how the reality itself, the biggest kind of truth, is quite hard to bear yourself because mostly what you are trying to accept, what you are trying to integrate into your way of seeing things is compressed with so many other notions that might as well not be even close to a reality, but which you can discard, or else you will see how your whole system fails. But anyways, that is only an excuse to not even try to do it. So yeah, let me see. How do you even begin to describe properly for a mind who has never stopped to consider something of that sort? What our limitation is and how can you even try to make a proper explanation out of that is quite a challenging thing, indeed. But it doesn't mean that it is impossible to achieve. Quite on the contrary, I will say, once you give yourself the opportunity of observing all of those surrounding concepts, you start to discover something quite amazing about it, and that is, indeed, in this whole process of discovery, that is the knowledge that you have, that you are trying to put into practice, you come in contact to begin with something quite shocking. The world itself exists out there, let's say, and you are simply somebody who transitions this world. You are simply somebody who experiences all of those things that are inside of the world itself. You, as yet another living being, and as it happens with everything else, you're also part of the system because the system sees you as something quite useful to have around, let's say. Quite hardly it ever becomes a reality that somebody in particular gets kicked out of it because they did something bad. And even when they did, there is always a new system that might be interested in accepting them inside of it so that that new system can keep existing. But that is not the point. What we're discussing here is how, by default, we can establish that everybody has a certain type of value in the places in which they live. And instead of that value, you start to realize most of the attributes that you were given by the very same definition of it show that you are being appreciated by what you are already known about. You are not given the qualities of somebody who is a great artist if you never even tried to make a piece of art. You're not considered an interesting talker if you never opened your mouth. You will never find yourself to be in any kind of way attributed the qualities of somebody who is formidable in any particular field, if you never ventured into those areas of expertise, let's say, and it is quite an obvious quality. It is only in the obvious, of the most evident ones, and it is only in those that you can find the beginning of a principle, let's say, because from there you can advance, you can get even better conclusions, you can start to build yourself up a little bit more. You start to understand that not only you are given the possibility of shining in those areas in which you begin to practice, but also that, as it happens with many people who try things out, you are going to be accompanied by those who have an interest for anybody who can to make the best of their attempts in those fields. It is the common practice to allow new people to come and to let those newcomers discover as much as they can, because there is something that is factual about the world in which we live in right now. We are interested more than anything else on the possibility of discovery. We are completely in love with the idea of being somehow capable of harnessing even bigger amounts of knowledge. We would give everything that we have right now if it meant that we could start to discover every other thing that we never had the possibility of even beginning to think about by ourselves. And that doesn't even start to encompass how much of an amazing thing it is to, as somebody who has hope, believe that those who might come after you might have as equal or even bigger chances of becoming successful in those particular fields from which they came from too. It doesn't mean that we are not interested in helping others out. It only is the sad reality of this world that we stopped talking about such an interest because it supposedly is a given and it supposedly becomes the nature of our daily life, of the modern life in which we are all immersed basically. We start to say that it is quite necessary to act in accordance with all of those things. We start to argue, we start to even go as far as we can to make up more and more reasons to justify the lack of effort that we put in life. And that is where we start to finally see all of those limitations come into practice. Because certainly, once you have started to lose faith in what might be your own potential, you start to keep justifying and you continue that very same path for as long as you can in order to make it look like you are somehow capable of not achieving what everybody else was already capable of getting. And sadly, it becomes an impossible task to begin to explain why it is so harmful for yourself to treat your own person with so much harshness when it comes to how you envision things happening and how you see the whole world around you being a thing that somehow is against you, yet another part of the system itself. It can only be described in parts and it can only be explained in mere fragments of itself. You can only receive the information, but with that, you need to begin to exercise the quality of judgment. Not to say to others that they are doing something bad, but rather to allow yourself the capacity of observation of maybe some days I have said to myself that I might not be good enough to try and reach any new ground. Maybe I decided to say to others that my future isn't going to be so bright because I might be already doomed. Maybe I have even given up on many of my goals because I didn't put enough effort just because I wanted to justify it as a problem for me. it isn't those observations, it is in the capacity to exert that degree of judgment in your own life that allows you to properly find a path to continue forwards, let's say. And the problem isn't that it's something quite hard. It isn't in any way truly hard. It is just part of how we are, how we deal with things that we believe truly that all these things around us are quite complicated. It isn't the reality itself, but it is better to say that it is complicated, and it is better to believe that it is complicated if it will justify your reasoning of somebody who is utterly defeated against the rest of the world, and somebody who is now truly incapable of achieving the same things that everyone else who came before you was capable of obtaining. It can only be observed, and it can only be reasoned through your own lens, and it can only be a judgment that you perform based on your individual experiences in life. But once you start with that, you can properly call those things limitations. That is the point of this, that you can give them a proper classification. Because what limits you so much isn't the outside, and what holds you back from obtaining what you say that you are dying for isn't truly out there. It isn't really that we all have an enemy and that we are impeded by the rest of the universe, that every single force in nature is fighting against the aspirations. No, it is quite stupid to say something like that, certainly. There are very few who might have the sanity and proper evidence to back up such sayings. The rest simply says those things and they are accepted by those who think the same way, but nobody ever stops to, once again, properly judge the situation in which they find themselves to be in. And that is the worst part about this, that you might have already started to abandon what you once had the opportunity of being good at, just because you started to impose more and more limitations upon you, just because you started to accept what is a negative quality of the thinking process that you hold in your daily life as something more influential and something more necessary than what it truly was all along. And with enough patience, you don't discover anything new or anything influential for your own good sake. You only learn about those things and you only gain those with an observation that comes from a proper judgment of yourself. And it can't happen that that degree of judgment could occur in anybody's life, because this isn't about just you. It is something that is common to every single human being. You can't exert a good quality of judgment if you haven't before started to define what were bad habits, and even more so, as we are talking about here, limiting factors that hold you back from properly being somebody capable of fully judging with a high enough degree of awareness about things so that you can arrive to even better conclusions. But that is kind of a different topic. Finally, trying to tie everything mentioned here back, trying to give it a final structure. If we had to try and define it as something, what are those limitations that we experience in life? They are not truly that big, and they are not truly that present in anybody's life. And there is something that I also started to forget that I should have mentioned, and that is and something even better than discovering that you are not limited in any way, that you are not negatively affected, is to discover with a more objective view what are later on the real final frontiers of anybody's capacities, because there is something amazing in discovering that this world doesn't really have that many final frontiers which nobody can go through. We live right now, 2024, in a reality in which, quite luckily, everybody can say that many fields of knowledge have yet a lot to give to us. And what is needed is somebody who can keep advancing on those discoveries. But we just lack the knowledge about them. It doesn't mean that you can't try it. It doesn't mean that you can, if you so wish it, spend the rest of your whole life pursuing as many discoveries of any field as you can. It is impossible to say that when we are standing in a reality in which there are so many things uncertain yet. And the worst part, also, I guess, I have to admit it, is even if it doesn't mean that you are going to go for the highest type of goal, that you are not going to solve every single one of the problems of the world by yourself, which we don't even know if it isn't possible to achieve. Even if you're not going to go for that, even if you have a more individually focused view on life, you can still be great. You just need to stop being so judgmental about yourself in the bad way which we have already defined. You just need to realize that the biggest limiting factor to your own life has been yourself for so long. And after properly addressing this in a way in which you will feel good, you can discover that maybe life isn't so bad, let's say. But that doesn't come so easily, that doesn't happen so often as we would need it to happen, sadly. But I guess that is the amazing part of this. You were just given something. Maybe it is a tool. Maybe it is the most useless thing for anybody to ever try. But unless you try it, you will not know if it is going to be useful or not to you. And just because you believe that you're going to spend time, which you are already doing, no matter what you do, you're going to spend time until your final breath. You might as well try to make it a good time instead of such a horrible, suffering filled one that gives you the normal life of those who never stop to observe their own existences as something more precious than what it really is, the description of the modern world. But, anyways, I guess thank you for listening, and I hope if it is useful in any kind of way, you can put it into practice. If not, you can also criticize it as much as you want, you know? That is the wonder of this. You can present your complete counter argument, and I am more than happy to hear about it if you have one. Good luck.